Tucker and the President of El Salvador. And the President of El Salvador starts talking about MS-13. Okay. And MS-13 is a gang. It's one of the gangs that you hear when Trump's Tom Homan, right, border czar, HHS are rounding up gang members. MS-13 is one of them. It's a big gang. It's a worldwide like crime operation. It's almost like think of it as like a mafia. And it started out as a small gang, and now it's a major worldwide operation. And they're vicious. Okay. But so the president of El Salvador had to deal with them when he took over power, and it was one of the situations he had to handle. So Tucker, in the interview, talks to him, and this is what he has to say about them. And I thought this was like a little frightening. So here it is. The president of El Salvador just told Tucker that MS-13 participates in satanic child sacrifice rituals after he saved the country from the gang takeover. But the media told me that this was supposed to be a conspiracy theory. So here's Tucker and the president of El Salvador talking about MS-13 and satanic. They're a satanic component. So let's go ahead and play this.
MS-13 is one of the major gangs.
And they are satanic also.
That was my question. So very little.
Sorry.
No. But I hope you will explain it, because very little has been written in the West about this.
They're satanic, yes.
But actually, literally, can you explain?
Well, they didn't start as a satanic organization. They MS-13 started in Los Angeles, in the U.S., because Salvadorans weren't allowed to sell drugs by the Mexican gangs. So they created a gang that was called the 18th Street Gang, because they basically wanted to sell drugs in a street that was 18th Street over there. But then division started they started dividing themselves and started infighting. So they created the MS-13. And then MS-13 started outgrowing the other gangs, and they started exporting the organization to other parts of the U.S. And when Bill Clinton decided to deport those guys, he didn't tell our government at the time, I'm deporting this criminal. They just send them here. And they came, there were few, but unchecked. At the same time, some laws were passed to protect minors from imprisonment. And of course, the gangs use that to recruit 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds. So at the beginning it was, some youth causing harm, assaulting, trying to control their territory, selling drugs, things that are bad, but they're probably not critical. But they grew, and they started controlling territories. A few years later, they were actually a huge international criminal organization that they have bases in Italy, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, the U.S. Basically, a lot of major cities in the U.S. will have strongholds of.
Right outside Washington, D.C.
Yes, of course. And you have in Long Island and
yes.
In L.A. It's a huge criminal international organization. So they grew, and they started, killing more people just to get territory, or to fight against rival gangs, or to collect debts or money or whatever. But as the organization grew, they became satanic. They started doing satanic rituals. I don't know exactly when that started, but it was well documented.
Yes.
And in our arrest, we've even found authors and things like that.
Yes, I've seen them.
And so they became a satanic organization. And even when you sometimes when you interview gang members that are in prison, they will say, "I'm out of the gang." Of course, they're in prison, but they will say, "I'm not a member of the gang anymore." And when they ask them why, I remember I remember the news outlet that made it this, but it's a very well-known news outlet that made this interview with a gang member in person. We allowed them to go into prisons and do interviews. And the guy that they asked him, "How many people have you killed?" And he said, I don't remember. He didn't remember how many, probably 10, 20. He didn't remember. And then they asked him, and what is your position in the gang? He explained how he went up in positions, but I left the gang. I said, why did you left the gang? And he said, well, because I was used to kill people, but I killed for territory. I killed to collect money. I killed for extortion. But I came to to this house, and they were about to kill a baby. And the killer that had killed tens of people, said, "Oh, wait, what are we doing? Why are we going to kill that baby?" And they told him, because the beast asked for a baby, so we have to give him a baby. So he said that he couldn't resist that, so he left the gang. He's in prison because he's a killer, but he left the gang because he couldn't tolerate what he was seeing.
So human sacrifice was a part.
Well, in the United States a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of days ago, I don't remember exactly, I saw the news that they were going to kill a young girl, or they killed a young girl. I don't exactly remember, because it was a satanic ritual. It happened in the U.S. a couple of weeks ago.
So that's almost never described
No.
in English language press as clearly as you just described it.
No, which is weird, right?
Well, you sort of wonder why.
Yeah.
If there's a spiritual component that's driving it, why not just say so?
Yes.
But I guess my point is, you saw it as that.
Yes, of course. There's a spiritual war, and there's a physical war. And the physical war could be, that's the unofficial.
Yes.
That's the unofficial version. The spiritual, if you win the spiritual war, it will reflect into the physical war. So I don't know how to call it, our impressive victory was because we won the spiritual war very, very fast.
Well, that leads me,
because you didn't have competition. I mean, they were satanic. I think that made it easier.
In your inaugural, and I was listening on headphones for the translations, I just want to check this. You said, we have achieved this great victory and made this a safe country, and that's the predicate for everything that follows. And the next thing we're going to do in this term is to work on the economy to make it better.
Grow the economy, yeah.
And you said, correct me if I'm wrong, you said I have a 3-point plan. And I'm thinking, I wonder what that is. I don't know. Start a Federal Reserve Bank? And you said the first point of my plan is seek God's wisdom.
Yes.
That is what you said.
Yeah, I said that, yeah.
Why would that be the first point of an economic plan?
Why wouldn't it be? What should be the first part of the plan?
Well, I think it should be.
Yeah.
But I can't.
And most people would think that, right?
I've never heard any leader of any country say that.
Because they probably forgot to represent the people that elect them. Yeah. It's like you ask most of the people that elect the politicians, they say, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I believe that. But then you ask the politician, and he will say, no, that's not. So who is he trying to pander into? I mean, it doesn't make sense, right?
Do you think
it's a common sense thing to seek God's wisdom?
Of course.
Yeah.
It's a prerequisite for wise decision making, I would say.
Exactly. So that's the first part of our plan.
MS-13.
Well, there you go. I mean, some things shouldn't be interrupted. I struck me, man. There's so much in that. I mean, first of all, just the awareness of how when you hear gangs there's so many levels. Let's start with the most, street level. No pun intended. So you hear about these gangs, and you hear about the border. And, you have this idea that it's like, 42nd Street, the movie or something, the play, these are criminal operations. They're organized. They're powerful. They're dangerous. It also connects back to the Pope Francis thing. I don't keep bringing it up, but it is what it is. And when you're reckless with the idea of the border and people coming across, and people coming across are involved in this, then you start I had a message yesterday, and he said, somebody said to me, because I made a point about the immigration issue, and I said, a lot of people get mad at the Catholic Church. And when leaders make comments like this about the border, because and then that's when they start to say, well, priests and popes and they're not married, they don't get it. And this goes back to that point. When you're a protector of a family, it's like a visceral thing. Your hair stands up on the back of your neck, and you're like, whoa. And when I watched that video, and he's talking about MS-13, and we hear MS-13 on the news, and they're around, and they're the ones part of the people coming across the border, and part of the people involved in the drugs and the human trafficking. The same human trafficking that Pope just last week put out a big thing about. We have to stop human trafficking. You have to stop human trafficking. You have to stop human trafficking, and then criticizes Trump for trying to maintain the border, which is probably the number one way to limit human trafficking is to control the border, because they have to be trafficked somewhere. So this show is whatever. To me, it's great. It's great personally, because it helps me confirm how all these things are connected. And so we go from this knowledge of MS-13 and how powerful they are, and we see this young president who's radically changed the nation. And then we see Tucker Carlson, who's Tucker's. I like Tucker a lot, and he can get a little bit wrapped up in the conspiracy stuff, I think, sometimes, but I think it's understandable because there's so much to be skeptical of. And so the satanic part comes up, and the president goes through this story, and I think, do we believe that there's an evil in the world, or are they just bad people? Right. And actually, it opens up again about the Pope. I mean, he's the one of the spiritual leaders in the world. And is there evil? Obviously, the president of El Salvador thinks there's evil, and that these people are worshiping evil. And I think it's like a cold it's a cold bucket of water on your head. We have to be aware, right? It's a spiritual war. It's a spiritual combat. And as he said, if you win the spiritual war, well, then the war on the worldly level, takes care of itself. And I'm going to finish with this thought about the El Salvadorian president that Tucker pointed out that in his inaugural, I guess he was reelected, said that the first thing he's going to do is seek the wisdom of God. Wow. Right? Wow. The wisdom of God. Amen, amen. I say to you, right? The wisdom of God.